This Sunday we celebrate Pentecost. The disciples had walked with Jesus through his ministry in towns and cities, in hills and fields, and by the shores of the Sea of Galilee. They had seen his miracles and had listened to his teaching. They had entered Jerusalem in triumph with him and suffered the trauma of watching him die on the cross. They had watched as his body was laid in the tomb, and then they had witnessed his resurrection. They had seen and touched and spoken to the risen Lord, and he had assured them of his love. It seems, however, that this was not enough, for the disciples had not been made braver or stronger by the resurrection. Without Jesus there beside them, it seems that they were uncertain of just what they were to do next. Jesus must have understood that this would happen, and he told them to wait after his death in Jerusalem, where they would be baptized by the Holy Spirit, and this Holy Spirit would fill them with the power of God. What exactly happened on the day of Pentecost, we will never really know. The disciples would describe their experience of this day in terms of wind and fire, two of the most powerful of natural elements. What we know did happen was that the disciples became somehow charged with the glory and the power of God. God now not only surrounded them, but God was within them. God filled them and empowered them with his Spirit. The Holy Spirit is difficult to define or describe, but let me try to do both. I believe that the Holy Spirit can be seen clearly in the ways in which we behave towards one another and to other people that we don't know, in the way we speak and in the things we do. Whenever a human being treats another with respect and love, this is when we see the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ at work in the world. This was the message which Jesus gave to his disciples and to us when he said, "Love one another just as I have loved you." This love is not just about us as individuals, but it also applies to families, to communities, to countries, and to nations. So I would suggest that it is fairly easy to see Jesus and the Holy Spirit around us. Granted, we have to search quite hard sometimes, and sometimes much more than at others. But the Holy Spirit is most definitely here. Think of the coming together of individuals, communities and nations this past year in order to help neighbours and those in need with the vaccine, if nothing else. The Holy Spirit is just like the wind. It dries washing on lines, it's capable of bending great trees and in making waves on a stormy sea. This is what the Holy Spirit does and is. You can't see it, but you can definitely see what it does. The Holy Spirit is the human face of God, the human face that Jesus came to show us. Jesus gave us the Holy Spirit to enable us to do good things in his name, and whenever this is done, I believe that God is seen in our world. A wise old man once owned a gold coin. "I don't really need this coin. It gives me no pleasure. What use is it to me if I do not share it?" he mused one day. Just then he saw a child passing by, and he gave her the coin, believing that her need was greater than his. The child couldn't keep her eyes off the shining gold coin. "I'll give it to Mother," she thought. "She needs so many things, and this coin may help to make her happy." The child's mother was delighted with the coin, as it would solve so many problems. As she was deciding what to do with it first, there came a knock at the door. At the door stood a beggar. The woman was filled with pity. We can get by, but this man has nothing, she said to herself, and she handed him the coin. As the beggar made his way back to the bridge he slept under, he began to think of the things that he could now buy. But when he got back to the bridge, he found that another resident had arrived. This man was homeless too, but this man was also blind. He may need the coin more than I do, thought the beggar, as he pressed it into the thin, cold hands of the blind man. That evening, the wise old man walked under the bridge. Seeing the blind beggar, he stopped to speak to him. The beggar could not remember the last time anyone had bothered to talk to him properly. The wise man, putting his arm on the blind man's shoulder, said quietly, "I have nothing left to give. I have nothing left to give you but my friendship." Tears filled the blind man's eyes. How could he repay this simple gift of human kindness? Taking the gold coin from his pocket, he gave it to his new friend. "Thank you for loving me," he said. Jesus called the Holy Spirit an advocate. An advocate is a lawyer whom you call in a court of law to be at your side and to speak up for you, and to use words and do things that perhaps you're unable to say and to do for yourself. The wonderful thing about the Holy Spirit is the promise it gives to help us, to guide us, and to show us what we should do. Jesus said that the Spirit is with us forever. He also said that this is the Spirit of truth, which will lead us to understand the truth about God and the world. In this story of the gold coin, I think that the Holy Spirit is shown in each of the people as they try to make another person's life easier through a simple act of kindness. The blind beggar is the one who describes the Holy Spirit when he says, "Thank you for loving me." Nobody needs to struggle to find God, because God is here in our hearts. The Holy Spirit is here in all the good things we do and say, in all the good things we hear and see enacted out in our world. The Spirit of God fills the world because the Spirit of God rests on each and every one of us and rests around the world. The gift of the Holy Spirit is everywhere because God is everywhere. This is the God who fills all time and all space. Pentecost is important because it is a celebration of the world's new relationship with God. At Christmas, God came into the world to give us hope. At Easter, God died for us and gave us his love. At Pentecost, God breathed upon us and gave us a way of living. And so because of Christmas, Easter and Pentecost, we are able to live in love with hope.